Hello, welcome back to my channel and to my BBC TV Shakespeare retrospective, and this time we've reached the big one, Hamlet. Now, I'm not going to sit here and talk about Hamlet the play too much because this is the most analysed play in world history. You know all the themes, you know all the ideas in it, so I'm not going to go over them. What I will say is that I studied this play first at A level alongside Macbeth. And it only occurred to me now, after all this time, how closely the structure of the two plays and the themes of the two plays mirror each other. You know, both about a man going to do something which might damn them to hell, one for ambition, one for revenge, and then so they're constantly thinking through and intellectualizing it. The woman that they're close to goes mad, you know, she's sane and then she becomes mad later on in the play. There's all sorts of incredible parallels. Anyway, and I loved both plays when I was a teenager. I was really inspired by both of them. I'll tell you a little story about my favourite stage adaptation that I ever saw live. We travelled down to London on a bus, the group of kids, to see the National Theatre production of it, which was going to star Daniel Day-Lewis, who was then in his prime. And Daniel Day-Lewis had some kind of stage fright. He had some kind of breakdown and he had to leave the stage. And so it was his understudy, and we were all really disappointed. But the understudy was brilliant. He was so good, and to this date, is still the best Hamlet I've ever seen on stage. And it wasn't until many years later, until I realised who it was. Jeremy Northam, who's appeared in various movies. He's in Gosford Park, playing Ivan Novello, I believe. And you just never think that this guy would make a great Hamlet, but he was superb. I also saw Mark Rylance when I was at school playing Hamlet. He was good. I didn't like the production at all. The director really overdid it with all sorts of gimmicks. And Rylance, brilliant actor though he is, has a tendency to play to the audience, to play for laughs, which got in the way a bit, I thought. I also thought that David Tennant more recently was much better than I expected. But in this production, we have Derek Jacobi. Now, on this channel before, I've said that I think that Derek Jacobi was the greatest Shakespearean of his time, and I think this is the definitive Hamlet. I think it's the single best portrayal of Hamlet I've ever seen. It's so good that it's too good for the production it's in. It's really like, you know, Derek Jacobi is 10 out of 10, and the production is 7 out of 10. You know, he's too good, really, for this TV production, but my God, he's brilliant. He's so good, and I've never seen an actor in the part do one of two things. First of all, Hamlet is such a difficult role. For a young male actor, it's incredibly hard because you've got to hit so many different beats. The problem with Hamlet is there is no other character in Shakespeare like Hamlet. He is quite unique because if you look at the other male characters, the other male tragic heroes, they're sort of proper men, right? They're male, they are advanced in years, they're middle-aged, they're important people, they're experienced people, they're embroiled in the politics of their land. Hamlet is in that, you know, queasy phase between being a boy, an adolescent, and a man. And he's trying to work it all out. He's mixed up. And when we first see him, he's kind of weak. You know, he's being a bit drippy. Everyone else has moved on from the death of the father, and he's sort of sitting there moaning, you know, dressed in black. He's a bit like a sort of modern goth type figure. And this is one of the problems of Hamlet, is that we don't always like him, and we're not always meant to like him. He's very cruel to Ophelia, very cruel to Gertrude. You know, and there's that scene with Gertrude. You know, every director ever always has them rolling around in bed with each other, don't they? It gets a bit tiresome. Anyway, so he's a sort of, he's like a boy, you know, like an adolescent. He's kvetching against the world. He's moaning, he's whining, but he's also a prince. And he's got all those attributes of a prince, and at the end he acquits himself brilliantly in the fencing. And isn't Derek Jacobi brilliant in the fencing scene here? It's so good, his movement is fantastic. Anyway, so for an actor it's very difficult, because Hamlet has to be sympathetic, because he's the person we're following. But he also is unsympathetic. He may even be mad, right? He's a whining boy, but he's also a prince. He's a boy and a man. And you've got to hit all those elements. And Derek Jacobi hits every single one. It's quite brilliant. The other thing that I think Jacobi does that I've not seen in any other production of Hamlet I've ever seen on stage or on screen, One of the problems with Shakespeare's tragedies is he front loads the first part of the play, the first three acts, acts 3.5, with all the themes and the meat, right, and all the acting. Then there seems to be a break. In this play, it's when he goes off to England and then he gets kidnapped by pirates or something, and somehow he ends up back in Denmark. And then after his sea journey, he's changed and he's resolved to do it, right? So in every production of Hamlet I've ever seen, you've got all this, Sturm and Drang, all this, he meets that ghost, he gets, starts to worry about revenge, and he does all this stuff with Ophelia and all this stuff with Gertrude, does he, questions whether he should kill Claudius. Then there's a break, and suddenly, you have the gravedigger scene, and then you into the battle, right? This is the only production I've seen, and I give it full credit for this, where there is a continuity, a harmony, a unity across the whole play, and where there's an integrity in the way Hamlet is played. And it's all down to Jacobi. He keeps you believing in it all the way through. So whereas in previous productions I thought there was a break and it was like Hamlet Part 2, this feels of a piece. And I really admire Jacobi for maintaining that continuity throughout the play. I marvel at this play. It is a brilliant play. You can't get past it. As a teenager, I fought against it a bit, and I found I just wanted Hamlet to get on with it. As a young man, you thought, oh, God, just stop moaning and get on with it. But when you watch it as an adult, my God, the way all the themes are thought through, the idea of madness that we saw in Twelfth Night, the madness of love. But this play investigates all elements of madness, but then at the same time of play acting. What is your position as a man in social status versus your position interior, and your idea of mortality and death? It never occurred to me when I was studying it that the last bit with the swords, and I just thought that was the end of the play, but it's brilliantly worked out, because all the way through the play, Hamlet is thinking, I really want to commit suicide, but I daren't, because of what comes after. Claudius has gone to the point of killing his father, but then when it comes to actually thinking about, God and mortality, he can't even pray. Everyone is stifled by this fear of death, this inconsequence of just being made of dust. And so that all their actions are stifled, they don't really know what to do. And in the end, everyone kills each other by accident, not by design. I never really thought about that before. All of the ideas and the themes dovetail together and reflect on each other so brilliantly and in such a complex way. I didn't really appreciate it properly when I was a teenager, but watching it now, it's just incredible. Now, this production is a decent production. I wouldn't say it's a brilliant production, but it's decent. I have to be honest, right? If you're a Doctor Who fan out there, I am a Doctor Who fan. Okay, I'm guilty as charged. You'll get a sense of déjà vu watching this production, not least because Ophelia is played by Lalla Ward, who was, of course, a companion back in the 70s and 80s with Tom Baker. She eventually married Tom Baker in the end, and then after that went on to marry Richard Dawkins. Interesting. Now, she didn't get many outings in big television productions. She's okay here. She speaks the verse well. What this production throws up is the female parts in Hamlet are so difficult to get right because they don't actually have much to do. Ophelia is basically a sort of wet, wimpy, nice girl, and then she goes a bit bonkers, right? It's a part that trips up many young actresses. They often get the first bit right, the sort of easy bit, and then the second bit when they have to go mad and throw flowers around, it's always a bit embarrassing on stage, isn't it? So it's a bit squirm-inducing. Intriguingly for Lalla Ward, it's the other way round. She's a bit, not wooden, but she's a bit mannered in the early scenes with Hamlet. And one great flaw with this production is that there's no chemistry between her and Jacobi at all. You don't really believe that Hamlet's in love with her, which, kills the emotion. This is a guy who's going to get angry with her brother for jumping into the grave and rages at her graveside. You don't feel any of that sense of passion. I suppose Jacobi must take some, he must take some criticism for that as well. But Lalla Ward he and Lalla Ward don't really gel. But interestingly, she's quite good at the mad bits. It's some of the best mad bit Ophelias I've ever seen. So credit to her for that. Patrick Stewart is an excellent Claudius. He's ageless, isn't he, Patrick Stewart? He looks the same age then as he was 10 years later doing Picard in Star Trek The Next Generation. Ageless. I forgot about Doctor Who. Sorry, I just want to go back to Doctor Who quickly. It's not just Lalla Ward. It's directed by a guy called Rodney Bennett. And Rodney Bennett directed some of the early episodes of Tom Baker's Doctor Who in the 70s. And there's one particular episode that's of interest here. It's an episode called The Mask of Mandragora. It's of interest because The Mask of Mandragora is set in Renaissance Italy. And it has a masked ball. And it has, people in costume, rather like the play of Gonzaga, the play within the play in Hamlet. And it's so fascinating to watch this because there's a guy called Stuart Fell, who was a stuntman actor who was in all sorts of BBC productions. And in Mask of Mandragora, the Doctor Who story, he plays a kind of court jester, an acrobat. And he does exactly the same act as he did in Doctor Who. He does a sort of somersault, he goes, ho, and breathes fire out of his mouth or something, exactly in Doctor Who. I kind of wonder if that's why Rodney Bennett was hired as the director. Also is a innovation in this production, in the BBC television Shakespeare, which I don't really care for. They introduce incidental music. The incidental music is composed by Dudley Simpson, who was, of course, the in-house Doctor Who composer. He composed almost every Doctor Who score throughout the 1970s. So there's a real déjà vu sense, both visually and aurally, if you're a Doctor Who fan. But they put in this incidental music when actors are speaking the verse. I don't agree with that at all. Not at all. Now, I'll just remind myself of the actor who plays Laertes, David Robb. Now, David Robb looks the part. He's a sort of, tall, tough, robust man. He's very passionate. He's not the greatest actor. And I've noticed that they keep bringing in the incidental music when he speaks. And almost to sort of, push up his speeches a bit. A bit embarrassing, that, and I feel a bit sorry for him. Anyway, back to the rest of the cast. Again, the difficulty of the female parts. I mean, Gertrude, such an important role. But actually Gertrude doesn't have much to do. This production of BBC, I haven't gone back and checked it, but I think it's the full play. There's nothing cut out, which is quite unusual. It's a very full production, right? But even in this full production, Gertrude doesn't say or do very much. You don't really get much of her until that scene in the bedroom where he rails against her. And even there, she's just a victim. She doesn't sort of answer back. So we've got Claire Bloom, brilliant actress. She was superb as Catherine of Aragon in Henry VIII. She's good here, but she doesn't really come forward because, in a way, the part doesn't let her come forward. Oh well. We must make mention of Patrick Allen. He's the man playing the ghost. Now, to viewers at the time watching this, he'd have been much more famous for his adverts. He used to advertise Barratt Homes. Do you remember this? And he'd go around in a helicopter. And he's got this very, strong, gravelly voice. And of course, he's more famous to British viewers for his voiceovers. He appeared on so many adverts. He did the voiceovers for so many sort of pop culture shows. You almost expect him while he's intoning as the ghost for, some crisp packet to be advertised or some supermarket. But he's surprisingly effective, I think, as the ghost. Although you wouldn't imagine that Claire Bloom would want to marry him. We also should mention a very minor figure in the cast, Ian Charleson. He plays Fortinbras, who comes in at the end, and he's extremely wooden, not very good. But of course, a couple of years later, he'll be a major star as one of the leads in Chariots of Fire. So here he is, starting out, let's say. So overall, I think this is a showcase for Derek Jacobi's fantastic performance in a so-so production where the actors are doing a good job, but they're not quite up to his level. Thanks very much.